This episode of Storycomic Presents is sponsored by JanusPointPress.com. Watch out for wormholes. Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 320. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're honored to have with us the internationally celebrated and award-winning children's book author and illustrator, Ashley Wolff.
Perfect
Ashley.
Pronunciation, Barney. Thank you.
See? Yeah, look at that. See, and it's exciting to talk to you. And anybody that's actually watching this or listening to this, I guarantee if you have children in your home, I guarantee your bookshelf has one of Ashley's books on the shelf. It's interesting because some of your books started off as, some of them you've illustrated for, some of them you wrote and illustrated for. And also some of them you've done through printmaking, some of them you've done through watercolors. You've also done many different types of illustrations.
Mm-hmm. So I started right after I graduated from art school. I went to San Francisco and lived there for a while, but then I really had the yen to put my illustration degree to work. And so I went back to New York and showed some of my printmaking work and other stuff and got my first book contract.
And so talk to us a little bit about that. You started off doing some of your artwork for children's book illustrations for other children's books authors, correct?
Well, I wrote and illustrated my first book. It was called A Year of Birds, and it did well. It did well enough to launch my career, and I've never looked back. Then I took a public domain piece called The Bells of London. That was my second book. And then I did a book called A Year of Beasts, which was a follow-up to Year of Birds. And then I did Only the Cat Saw. So I would say out of my first 4 or 5 books, I wrote most of them.
And Only the Cat Saw, you wrote that when you were not living in Vermont.
None of the books I wrote were while I was living in Vermont. They were all after I'd moved to California.
And what I love about Only the Cat Saw, that was one of my daughter's favorite books reading, is because it almost feels like takes place in Vermont.
Oh, it totally does. Well, you know what they say, Barney, about authors, that their first books are always autobiographical. And so my first book was A Year of Birds, and it was largely autobiographical. It had many components that were very drawn from my growing up in Middlebury. And then it had some imagined components of the way the place I wish I had grown up. Like, I never got to ride a school bus, but the girl in the book does. And I never had a pond on my property, but she has a pond. So, it's wish fulfillment. That is the artist's prerogative. We can put whatever we want in the book. Right. And then Only the Cat Saw was an idea I had while living in California, but all the research for it was done on a farm on Munger Street in Middlebury. And I knew this lovely family. They had 2 little girls. I went out there and photographed their cat, their farm, their farmhouse, the children. And that's where all the material for that book came from.
So I'm also curious, Ashley, do you come up with an idea for a book, then decide the medium you're going to use? Or do you have a medium that you want to make a book on, and then you try to find a topic for that?
No, I think the former. The book, the idea, the story dictates the medium. And it's not quite that simple, because I have occasionally started a book in one medium and then realized, oh, this isn't working. I'm going to switch. So
Really?
that doesn't happen often, but it has.
Is there a medium that you prefer that seems to be more of a you're naturally more inclined to do children's books on?
Well, there are easier and harder mediums. Probably the
Okay.
easiest for me is I'm a great proponent of gouache, which um, artists will recognize the word. It's a French word spelled Gouache, Gouache, and it's pronounced like a G apostrophe WASH, gouache. And it's watercolor, but it has a lot of pigment in it. So it can be used opaquely, but it can also be used transparently. And I started using it back in the 90s, I think, when I was doing some advertising, surface design work, and bought a set and thought, oh, yeah, I'll just use this opaquely. But then I had it around and I started experimenting with it, and I realized, oh, it's like watercolor, except when you're done, it doesn't wash off the page. And so I'm the proselytizer for gouache for artists because it's really forgiving, has all the same colors as Winsor Newton watercolor, and it's the only paint you'll ever need.
So some of the books that you've done, as you mentioned, you've actually wrote and illustrated, and some other ones you are the illustrator for an
Yeah.
author.
I
Um,
tried to make a living along the way there.
right.
And
So,
mostly the books that I've done for other people have been my most successful books.
mm,
So I learned a little lesson there, a little fiscal lesson that, like I illustrated Baby Beluga by Raffi back in, I don't know, 1990, 89.
mm.
Still in print, still making royalties. God bless Baby Beluga. So, books, I mean, I don't know, most people don't really understand the economy of books, but if you are lucky enough to have a book that stays in print and continues to sell and sell and sell, you can make royalties every year, and all the work that you did was 30 years ago.
Those are physical pictures, right? Those aren't digital.
No, I've never worked digitally. I
Do
mean,
you?
I should probably, but publishers are really perfectly fine with having you deliver work on paper.
Right,
They scan it and they kind of enjoy it, I think, as a novelty.
right.
I have a book, I
It's
just sent in a book 2 weeks ago that's all on paper. And yeah, there's one step in between, they're scanning it. But, you know, pixels are meant to be manipulated. And once they're created by scanning, they can be manipulated by the publishers as well as by me.
Do you still retain the ownership of those physical illustrations?
Yeah, every author does. I mean, or every
Okay.
illustrator. We own those under the, Library of Congress.
Are you able then, as running almost you running your own business in this sense as an artist, is that you're able to put those out and say like art shows
Yeah.
or sell those illustrations as well?
Yeah, it's funny you should bring that up because I've just been corresponding with a museum in California that has been gifted 3 illustrations that I did back in the 90s, and they're like, "Oh, how are these done? What is the medium? Where are they from?" And I sold a lot of my work back then.
Right.
And it's become somewhat detached from its original source, and so I've been sending them book covers and you know more information about the medium. So that's all to say that now I'm a lot less anxious to sell my work, because I just feel like when it breaks, when a book is broken up, it loses value.
Right.
Even though, the illustrations aren't always, equally frameable, it's good to keep it together. So
Right.
that's what I do now.
Oh, so you sell them all as like not as individual pieces, but as like a collection then?
No, I just keep them.
Oh, you just keep them.
I'm not trying to profit from them at all at this point.
Right.
But I
Right.
am thinking about, posterity, and I'm thinking about places where, you art illustrators and authors can donate artwork to several places around the country. There's a
Right.
place in Minnesota called the Curlin Collection, which is anxious to acquire everything, like not just artwork, but sketches and sketches and sketches and sketches and letters from your editor and letters from your art director. And those things used to be a thing. Like, I did have letters. Now I don't have letters. I don't print out my emails.
Hmm.
So all that discussion is done entirely in cyberspace. But
Right.
um, and then there's a place called the DeGrummond, which is in Mississippi, and I teach children's lit and art and design at Hollins University, which is in Virginia, and they're talking about trying to create an archive. And there's a lot of artwork floating out there, and I don't know where it's going.
Hmm.
It's grown a lot since I started.
Watch out for wormholes, because a good book is a wormhole, whether it's paper or pixels. Explore our artist books and chapbooks, including the winning 2022 Chautauqua Janus Prize Lecture at januspointpress.com. And sign up for news of our upcoming sci-fi, sensual, and literary collection, Event Horizon. This short story collection on cosmic decisions and their impact is written by award-winning author Stephanie Nina Pizzarillos and features comics, prose, photography, and original canvas work by an array of exciting artists. Visit januspointpress.com. So, where have you seen the evolution of the children's books, the world of children's books?
Well, I mean, I'm old enough so that when I started, it was I was told that I would have to pre-separate my art. And that was in the early 80s. And I was like, what? I have to designate where the yellow and the red and the blue are going to go, and where the yellow and the red are going to overlap. And I did one spread, and it was awful. And then my small, like, publisher called Dodd Mead finally entered, the laser separation era, and I was saved at the last minute. My book was laser separated. And so that was in 83.
Yep.
But they were late to the party. So other people had been doing it for a long time before that. And
Right.
so that happened. And then, I don't know, it was just like a small world. It seemed big to me back then, but it was really small. And laser separation changed everything because, nobody wanted to do that hand separation. So that kind of limited the field of people who wanted to be illustrators. And once that was, no longer an issue, the sky was the limit. You could do anything.
Right.
So it actually, marked a exponential growth. Plus, the
Right.
90s were huge, and there was a lot of money around, and there were a lot of kids being born. All the millennials were being born, and
Mm.
that drove the children's book industry. Not sure what's happening now. I know that people are, there's definitely a baby bust going on right now, and with good reason.
If someone's looking at wanting to get into children's book, being a children's book illustrator now, what advice would you give someone who's coming out of art school right now?
Well, I teach this every summer. So my big push when I'm a professor is learn to draw really well. And then once you've learned to draw, abstract and simplify and stylize. So let us know subliminally that you know what you're doing, but then go ahead and work in your style. And there are people who argue with me and say, oh, there's lots of naive styles that just require 2 dots for a face. And I understand that argument, but I still think that the really appealing children's book illustration is going to be quite sophisticated, but disguised as naive.
It's like the point too that you brought up in a previous interview as well, is like when it comes to writing a children's book, you're supposed to be very specific with your words and not how did you phrase it? Is like don't make your words suppose too much. When it comes to illustration, there seems to be so much room for detail and allowing. How important is writing a children's book or making a children's book that has the repeatable readability to it?
Well, that's a really good question, because it's kind of a magical combo of text and concept. Concept is really important, and then the illustrations. So a really great example in my experience is, say I gave you the sentence, "The little white dog was wearing a red coat." And I say, okay, Barney, which one of those words is really necessary? And if you really work your way through them, none of them are necessary, because they're all either nouns or verbs or adjectives. So instead, you could say something like, Rufus was late for his appointment. And then there's things you don't know. You don't know who's Rufus. You can probably surmise he's male. But, what is he? How he's late for which appointment? How is he going to get there? How does he feel about it? It has so many possibilities compared to the little white dog was wearing a red coat. Right. And so when I work with students on writing, I'm take out all the adjectives, take out all the adverbs, and look very hard at every noun and verb and conjunction to see whether they're really needed, or what you could put in instead, which are things that an illustrator can't show, like, sounds and smells and feels and, some action and emotions. And so, yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting art form. It requires brevity, but most people never see the effort that goes into it.
Have you actually been approached with a book, with a manuscript? You said, this isn't for me. Have you ever been able to be in that position where you said, I don't want to do this book?
Yeah, quite a few times. And in fact, the book I just finished, I wish I had been able to say that about.
Really?
But I didn't.
Right. Have there ever been opportunities, because you say like it's the children's book illustration field, and the children's books, it's a really big world, but it's also pretty small. Have you ever seen a book where you would say, oh, I wish I illustrated that one. That would have been fun.
Yeah.
In those positions.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So one of the trends that I've noticed and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, is that you illustrate a book, you either write and illustrate it or you just illustrate it, and it's a big hit. And then the next 5 books you get are exactly the same book, or slight variations on that theme. And if you are fast and facile and basically don't really care about your body of work, you do them because they're easy. You just did those, you can do them again. I am not fast or facile, and I always thought, I think I might be bored doing this again. So I usually turn those down. But so I'm always on the search for the next new thing.
It's, in a way, it's almost as you're like children's book illustrators. Do you also get to the point where almost like Hollywood actors, you could get typecast where
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. And
what are
that's
the,
really boring. And actors, I'm sure, feel the same way.
so what are some of the dangers that you've always felt like that you wanted to make sure that you weren't quote unquote typecast as a specific type of illustrator?
Oh, cute baby animals. Yeah. I'm really good at those. But I didn't want to do them over and over and over. Um, I, so I'm trying to think if I ever. So I got rid of my second agent quite a few years ago, and I think that happens more when you have an agent because they're showing your work to art directors, and the art directors know you for a certain style and subject matter, and they say, oh, I've got this manuscript, it would be perfect for this illustrator because look what she's done already. And so I got fed up with that back in, I don't know, like 2011, and ditched my agent. And so I've been agentless ever since, and so far so good.
Right. So it's almost like kind of like being a free agent in that sense, where you
Oh
can,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And scary. It has the scary parts too.
Does this give you a bit more freedom to pursue not a style, but like a genre of children's book that you've always wanted to do as well?
Yeah, but I have always done that. So I
Right.
think I was always a frustration to my agent. I kept certain publishers and editors apart from her. And it's hard for me to describe how the business side of publishing has affected me because it's not my favorite part of it at all.
Right.
If I could ignore the whole selling book side, I would be such a happy person. And I know that most people feel that way. I think
Right.
those of us who have have success, it's usually an unexpected success. We didn't plan this. If we'd known that this combination of love and daddy and something in the title would be a success, everyone would be doing that.
Right.
Successes are rare. They're weird, and they are very dependent on what's happening culturally in the world and in parenting and childhood. So who
Right.
would have predicted Harry Potter? Who would predict Where's Waldo? All these things sort of come out of the blue, and then
Right.
they blow up and become huge, and then they're gone.
Right.
And so you never know.
Right.
So I never wanted to try to bank on that. I just went my own way and have had some big successes and some big duds.
Right. So talk to us a little bit then, Ashley, about like your process. I mean, like, what's the day in the life of Ashley Wolff? How does that work?
Well, I've always been self-employed since I was in my 20s. So my favorite time to work is between about 3 and 9 at night.
Wow. Okay.
for some reason, mornings are a good time for me to get other stuff done. And then, unfortunately, when you have children, those hours don't work for you at all. That's when they get home from school, and you have to make dinner and then put them to bed.
Right.
So I usually worked from 9 to 1,
Wow.
and also in the morning.
Right.
I always lived in a house or an apartment in San Francisco. I had a dog, and I had 2 little boys who went to school, and yeah, I got a lot done. I don't know
Right.
how.
You
It's the
made
ADD.
time.
It's the
Yeah.
ADD. You just
Yeah.
like, if you were to look at my desk right now, Barney, you might be a little shocked because I have a lot of different things going on,
Right.
and that's normal. I don't sit and work on one project. I have maybe 4 or 5.
So Ashley, if people want to, learn more about your books and learn more about you, where's the best place they could go to?
Well, I have a website, ashleywolff.com,
Mhm.
because way back, I snagged that name, and nobody else has wanted it. Imagine.
I know.
And I am active on Instagram and Facebook, um, although pretty much just for fun.
Right.
I have an Etsy shop, so I've had that for a long time, and yeah, I sell a lot of stuff through that, mostly prints and not a whole lot of originals, but um, yeah, like that. I'm not super prolific when it comes to publicity.
Hmm.
I don't. I know that it's important, but I don't prioritize it.
Going to your Etsy shop. So it's etsy.com/shop/Ashley Wolff art.
Hmm.
You're able to get some amazing pieces of artwork from an award-winning children's book illustrator. Absolutely, for those folks that might have somebody that might appreciate her style of art, this is going to be a great Christmas present. It's amazing. Look at that, and you get a lot of stuff here for sale.
Yeah, because I'm really restless, and I'm always creating stuff. Oh yeah, so last year on January 1st, I got this crazy idea to do a year of birds.
Wow.
And my first book was called A Year of Birds, and it was published in '83. And I thought, um, all right, for 2022, I'm going to do A Year of Birds. Oh my God, it broke my neck. But I did it. I did 365 paintings of birds.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really something. I was obsessed with that.
Right.
But I don't think I would do that again. It was just too much. It just drove everything else out of my life. I divided it up into themes by month, and I had some really cool themes.
Check out, yeah, go to ashleywolff.com, and there you have the link to your Instagram page, a link to all your books,
Yeah.
and also checking out, going to your shop there that has your link to your Etsy page as well. Wow, that is a lot of
Those
artwork
owls, yeah,
there. Yeah,
yeah.
that's amazing.
But there's some birds here that are not, you know, customer favorites. They're a little bit more obscure.
Hmm.
So um, all the
No,
easy
they're
ones are already
beautiful.
sold.
Right.
So I'm a printmaker. You can see that I do linoleum block prints. I've always done that. Many of my books have been illustrated with linoleum block prints.
Wow.
And I sometimes teach online. I'm teaching a class right now called Kitchen Table Printmaking, where I have a bunch of students who are all over the country, and they're learning to do linoleum block prints.
Wow.
And it's fun. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
COVID gave us some silver linings. It gave
Right.
us Zoom and remote teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, you got your Miss Bindergarten.
Got some Miss
Yep.
Binderman stuff in there. Hmm.
Yeah. All right.
I'm a kind of a border
Beautiful.
collie fanatic.
Well, listen, Ashley, this was a genuine pleasure. It's been I've been excited to talk to you for a while now, ever since I've been, having all of your children's books around the house. So
Well, I'm
yeah.
glad you do. I'm glad
Yeah.
you have a kid who's still in my zone.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ashley.
Barney, it's been my pleasure. It's really fun to discover you. Coming back to Vermont has been, a great reunion with my past, and I'm happy to be here and to stay here.
Mm. We had I had somebody on that was he's an art professor on and he talked about the two types of artists are the octopus and the phoenix.
Oh,
If you heard that.
no.
So the octopus is somebody that just does a lot of things out, like does a little things all the time and just does this and then does this and then does this, and so is always doing something. And then the phoenix is someone that just concentrates on one thing
Oh,
intently until the project's over, and then just like blows up basically,
dies
and just
and
like,
is reborn.
and then just and like comes is completely, you have to reborn, so you're just basically just not doing anything until you get your energy again and did that. So yeah.
That's so interesting. So, was there any indication of which is more common?
He said he always worked as as an art professor. He's always been the octopus, but
Hmm.
he couldn't work on this one project. He had to concentrate on this one project, so he forced himself to be a phoenix and
Hmm.
just only do that one thing
Hmm.
until he finished it, and he was creatively exhausted for months afterward
I
until
can't
he
even imagine.
right.
Yeah. No, I am.
Yeah.
I'm octopus all the way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't even imagine being a
Right.
phoenix. It's
I can't. Yeah.
totally foreign to me.
Yeah.
I would be so bored being a phoenix.
I know. See, you gotta. There's something about the fact that you're able to just like do a lot of things at once, just to kind of,
Well,
then
yeah,
eventually things get done. Yeah.
yeah. And I do think that it's especially in illustration, it's actually an advantage to be a phoenix because, or at least to have those qualities and be able to be consistent in your style so that everyone can say, oh, yeah, she did that.
Right.
And
Right.
I've never had that ability. I've always been like, okay, I'm going to try this book in this style and this book in this style. And um, I would be too bored if I had to do two books in a row that were the same style. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a frustrating condition.
Right. Yeah. All right, Ashley. Let me read the intro, and then we'll go into it. So.